And welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Chinese and American officials discuss social and cultural dialogue to boost the people-to-people exchanges between the two countries. What role does cultural exchange play in improving the bilateral ties? And later, we'll speak to the governor of Missouri from the United States to find out how China and different states in the U.S. can work together. And we begin today's program with China-U.S. cultural ties. The first round of bilateral social and cultural dialogue has drawn much attention. It is one of the 4 high-level dialogue mechanisms established by President Xi Jinping and President Trump's Mar-a-Lago meeting in April. The dialogue is expected to increase people-to-people exchanges between the largest developed and the largest developing country.
Politics aside, cultural ties between China and the U.S. are diverse. These could pave ways for partnership that goes beyond the classroom and academic fields. To deepen them, the first round of social and cultural dialogue was established.
Never before have our two countries shared such extensive and common interests and shouldered such important common responsibilities.
The China-U.S. high-level cultural exchanges mechanism has achieved fruitful results over the past 7 years. Some 5 million mutual visits occur annually, with 14,000 visits every day. Communication between young people are especially active. International exchange students have increased, and a growing number of U.S. students are choosing to study in China, sharing their passion for Chinese culture. Experts highlighted the role education plays in fostering peaceful relations.
It is a true collaboration between China and the United States and many other parts of the world to help build greater understanding and deeper ties between the next generations of leaders around the world.
To be or not to be.
Meanwhile, cultural exchanges are also active in a variety of areas. Collection exhibits, art performances, and even theme parks have all closed the distance between people from both countries. The United States and China have the largest GDPs in the world, so when their heads of state get together, they're bound to talk numbers. But lasting connection between nations must be rooted in something more than figures. It is in the realm of cultural exchange that hearts and minds can be won.
Seems a lot of fun going on there. So what is the significance of U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's second visit to China? And before that, the people-to-people exchanges. Let's turn to our panelists. Gao Zhikai, current affairs commentator, and in Washington, D.C., we have Robert Daly, who's the director of the Kissinger Institute on China and the United States at the Wilson Center. I want to welcome both of you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly, you are not unfamiliar with people-to-people exchanges. You are even once starred in a Chinese TV drama back in the 1990s.
That's right. I've been working on cultural and educational exchanges between the U.S. and China for about 30 years now. 30
years, think about that. A lot of things have changed, Mr. Gao. You yourself was once the translator for Mr. Deng Xiaoping, the China's paramount leader, and certainly learning English, doing cultural exchanges with the United States is one of the biggest things then.
Absolutely. I think I can call myself a product of the cultural exchanges between China and the United States. One of my professors in college was actually a Professor Carlin from City University of New York.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I speak English with a little bit of an American accent, actually.
Well, it's great to trace back the history. Every one of us has one of those stories. But that also indicated there has been some foundation there, Mr. Daly, already over the past decades after China and the United States established diplomatic relations. But the thing is, in the new era, will people-to-people exchanges help us to solve the real problems? Mr. Daly.
Well, you've asked the key question. All of the kinds of exchanges we've had between United States and Chinese individuals, institutions, localities, universities have been, I think, overwhelmingly positive. They've helped with mutual understanding and joint problem solving. But at the same time, the strategic competition between the United States and China, strategic distrust are on the rise. for very real reasons, not because we misunderstand each other, but because of deep structural issues that point us toward a somewhat more adversarial relationship. And the problem I wonder about a lot, and I'll be very interested to hear your views as well, Professor Gao. We have all this positive exchange activity, but it doesn't seem to change our geostrategic distrust of each other. So what's the connection between the two? This remains a really frustrating question.
Okay, I think there's a deputy host of our today's program, Mr. Daly, already asked his question. So Mr. Gao, would you like to also answer that crucial question, which is, will trust people to people help us to create better trust between these two countries and two governments? That's the question.
I would say that people-to-people exchanges between China and the United States are necessary but not sufficient to achieve the goal of good relations between the two countries, because there are other factors which are equally, if not more important. For example, military exchanges, government-to-government exchanges, trade and economic relations, etc. So people-to-people is just one of the multifaceted relations between China and the United States. People-to-people exchanges can contribute to definitely better understanding between the two countries and higher level of trust.
Okay, here comes another question, Mr. Daly. Better understanding, does it mean better and bigger trust toward one another? Sometimes you do have that kind of interactions, but sometimes the more you get to know the other party, to a certain degree, you probably have further distrust toward that party and in conversations with the other party. What do you say?
I think that it can cut either way. I think that one of the reasons that Chinese, despite the fact that they're not anti-American, they're very well informed about the United States, one of the reasons they're suspicious about United States motivations is because they understand how deeply grounded in history and culture American sense of exceptionalism is. And on the other side, one of the reasons that Americans are as distrustful as they are of China is because we read Chinese history and culture and understand China's own sense of destiny to be the Middle Kingdom, to have a sort of a Tianxia system. So this is a case of distrust coming, I think, not from misunderstanding, but understanding. Still, having more information about the other country, I think, speaks against the ability of propagandists in both countries to demonize the other. And that's one of the biggest advantages of having more information, is it helps to humanize, and it speaks against the demonization that can lead to conflict.
But you know what? Usually the good messages doesn't get across through the public domains because they're not eye-catching enough. And yet, negative messages carry a long way and fast and spread around like a wildfire. So, Mr. Gao, this is the reality of the world we have to face right now. And the two countries, as you both said, do not have that ultimate trust toward one another. This is the reality. What can we do now, Mr. Gao? Can we be specific?
I think one fundamental question between China and the United States is whether the United States will come to terms with the fact that China eventually will be larger and more important than the United States, economically speaking, and in many other ways. And I think the United States is in the middle of that process, and hopefully by the end of the day, eventually the United States will feel comfortable with China, which is larger as an economy, which is more developed in many ways, and which still can live in peace and harmony with the United States.
But the thing is, Mr. Daly, can we, by learning China's history, can we try to talk to one another, even from university days, be able to help the Americans understand China is a rising country and its aspiration is to be better than what it is today?
So I think, first, I completely agree with Mr. Gao. I think he's got half of the equation exactly right.
What about the other half? Go ahead.
The other half of the equation is China. Can China become a modern nation, not in the sense of economics and in the sense of technological achievement, but how does China adjust to modernity? Modernity also including freedom, diversity, transparent representational government. The United States is uncomfortable with China's rise primarily for two reasons. One is, of course, America's own worries about loss of preeminence, but the other is the nature of the values, the institutions, the politics in China, which we will never be comfortable with if it doesn't change. So both countries face this challenge of fundamental change, but I think that it's on both sides.
Is it really the fundamental differences, quote unquote, Dr. Gao, that we're talking about here, that those changes not likely to change overnight? So what are we saying here?
No, I would say that between the Chinese people and the American people, there are more commonalities rather than differences in terms of their values. There are crucial differences in political values, for example. However, that should not be hurdles for a better relations between China and the United States. We are all moving forward, and we need to respect the differences in the Chinese culture versus the American culture, and we need to learn how to get along better going forward as partners, building a better world for all of us.
Well, I understand both of you gentlemen are eloquent speakers, beautiful communicators. However, you only have less than 2 minutes left. If I could articulate this question to you, both of you have deep knowledge about the other's country. And it is your job, in fact, in your society to speak up about what you know, especially about the so-called the stereotypes that your people mostly have toward the other country. Do you think people like you can speak up, dare to speak up, will be able to speak up, and the others will listen? Let's go with Dr. Gao first.
I would say that the Chinese people are friends with the American people, and there is no hostility among the Chinese people against the American people, and we want to live together with the Americans.
All right.
We want to get along, and we want to thrive and flourish together.
And you will talk about that in many of the occasions that you have, Dr. Gao, in China.
Absolutely.
Okay, not just on our network.
No, not at all.
Right.
I think I speak from the bottom of my heart that there is tremendous amount of friendship in China, among the Chinese people, towards the United States and the American people.
Yes, Mr. Daly, what about you?
I travel all over the United States, as do a lot of my colleagues at the Wilson Center, speaking to people about the challenge of U.S. China relations, but also the foundation and the promise of U.S. China relations. One of the difficulties in both countries is that with the 24-hour news cycle, with the desire that you've already highlighted for negative news, for stimulation, for excitement, it's simply very hard to be heard among all of the media froth.
Well, you're throwing the ball to my part of the court. I have to say we have to do our best as well in order to make sure it is a balanced and fair communication. For now, I want to thank the both of you for being with us. And we're going to follow this with another panel. Both of them from China and the United States have their stories to tell about the cultural people-to-people exchanges. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei. We'll be back after this. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei. We're going to continue our discussion about the people-to-people and cultural exchanges between China and the U.S. How will it work for the common good? Turn to our panelists once again. Joined in Beijing by Professor Teng Jimeng from the American Studies Center at the Beijing Foreign Studies University. Also in Beijing, David Moser, who is from the Yansheng Academy at Peking University. That's one of the newly established academies trying to promote cultural exchanges between China and the rest of the world. I want to welcome both of you. Earlier you heard the conversation between Mr. Daly and also Dr. Gao. I'm sure many of the points they articulated also come from the bottom of your heart. But let's talk about your story first. We want to show our audience there are real stories going on, real exchanges going on. What do you do, David?
Well, I go way back to the dinosaur age, to the 1980s. And that was an exciting period because that was the beginning of this process that
you were in China as a student.
Yes, I was at Beida as a student. And back then, the main thing was China really wanted to learn from the West. So it was kind of a one-sided deal. It was that the students wanted to go overseas, they wanted to get experience, learn English. Now, of course, it's a very different situation. Nowadays, we are trying to bring American students here and to learn from China and to experience China here so that they're better able to be China hands or to deal with this relationship on the ground.
After studying in China, you began to work in China, and later you become one of those directors of CET, which is one of those academic programs operated by the United States, bringing students to China on a half-year basis almost, and they got to explore all over China and together to live with their Chinese roommate and go to Chinese university, live in the same dorm, listen to the same class. It's amazing what is happening over there. I'm going to let you to tell those stories. And now you're with Yanqing, of course, bringing international students to the Chinese campus to talk about Chinese culture and its cultural exchanges. More to come. And what about you, Professor Tang?
Well, I'm not that very kind of late, the dinosaur age, but I actually went to
David pretty much presented what you just said.
Right, but we are almost the same age, in fact. But I went to the United States back in the 1990s also. I mean, starting from 1999 to 2000 as a Fulbright scholar based at NYU. And I benefit so much, both academically and also personally. I mean, that was a really kind of immersive experience for me because I began to know the society, not just from this very kind of a five-star hotel back in New York stuff, but it's a very kind of a day-to-day, everyday, people-to-people relationship. I have to rent my house in Bensonhurst in Brooklyn, and so in a sense, it's a very, very interesting and kind of in-depth experience in the States.
And of course, later in the years, just a year ago, you went to California as a visiting scholar, tried to study the film industry over there, and tried to do cultural comparison between China and the United States.
Well, I was basically placed at NYU, the film department, teach at School of Art, but then I also travel a lot to LA because I used to join the film crew of Farewell My Concubine and later on see young generations of filmmakers I mean, who travel to Sundance Film Festival, China-U.S. Film Festival in LA, and so lots of exchange out there, I mean, on the level of film, culture, and in general.
And are you saying you are one of those few between China and the United States, or actually there's a huge group of you guys over there being the bridge, learning from each other, and benefiter of the cultural and people-to-people exchanges? Professor Tang, very briefly.
I do. I mean, in fact, David invited me over to CGTN teach a Chinese course. I mean, in this case, beginning from a scholar, learning from the U.S. Now I teach American students film, Chinese film.
David?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Tang Jiman is an example of this kind of scholarly exchange.
I'm talking about you now.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You're talking about me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What would you like to know?
A lot, because
the stand-up comedian David.
This is too much. So many decades condensed into one discussion. You later also become a musician in China.
That's right.
You have a jazz band.
That's right.
Incorporating both Chinese and American musicians.
That's right. If you want to talk about soft power and you want to talk about cross-cultural exchanges, music, the arts is an ideal place because nothing brings people more together like music.
Universal language, right?
Universal language. And this was the kind of thing that now both of those worlds are very combined. It's very gratifying to see lots of Chinese musicians going overseas, learning the skills, and then coming back to China.
So here is the thing that both of you talk about. Earlier, it was about China opening itself up to the world and say, wow, this is the world. That was the time when you came to China. That was the time when you just went to the United States for the very first time. But now, things have changed. China is this wow factor for the rest of the world, for the United States too. So there is curiosity, there's also fear. So what about this stage? Probably the nature of people-to-people exchanges, the subject of it, and also the content and the depth of it has to also adjust in order to make sure this specific stage is going to be sufficient through people-to-people and cultural exchanges. David?
Yeah, I think it's very, very important that these cultural exchanges happen now among young people that we're dealing with.
And it's not just skin deep.
It's not just skin deep. It is if someone comes here and not only experiences the culture but learns the language, that experiences what it's like to be in this environment, they will be the future leaders or the people who are the future entrepreneurs who can actually create meaningful cooperation with these two cultures. Just now you had the discussion with Victor Gao and Robert Daly. They were talking about why has this cooperation culturally not translated into government-to-government cooperation or improved relations. Believe me, it will.
Yeah, it will.
Because we're talking right now a generation that in the next 20 years will be the leaders of China or will be among the elites in both cultures, and they will have a much better understanding of each other from having shaken hands, slept in the same room with them, and eaten the same food and so on and so forth. So I think you just wait and see. This will all have a big payoff in the next 2 years.
It's not skin deep anymore, according to David, but will it blossom? The question is, Professor Tang.
Well, I think I'm sure that it's going to be blossomed. Take for example, this 100,000 strong program initiated by President Obama's administration. I mean, so far, as I know, there are 68,000 people, students, coming over to China to study. I mean, for example, in my class, and they're learning how to make films, I mean, mini films. And now what they film hutong, they film dinner tables out there in the Chinese family, and talking to the heads of the family about what is the real role of the father and the mother, and also, I mean, women, public health, and all these issues in general.
So, with these kind of understanding, when they come into the leadership, will things change? That is your argument.
That's my argument, yeah.
I share the same argument. I think that future leaders will.
But, however, I have to add something, a little note here. So far, it's kind of been asymmetrical. A lot more Chinese go overseas to the United States. Like
200,000.
The U.S. has got a little catching up to do. We've got to figure out a way to get more students here to China for longer and deeper.
You've got a lot of catch up to do, but the question is whether people are curious enough and they want to be fulfilling their curiosity and be able to make their way to China. That is the question.
That's our job.
We want to make them curious,
right? Exactly. That's our job.
We will. I mean, in fact, when Chinese movies are shown in the United States, for example, The Great Wall, I mean, it attracts them. It attracts them to come over to see the real wall out there. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Well, we are talking about people-to-people exchanges. Everybody understands it shouldn't be a political tool. It has to be from the bottom of the heart. Otherwise, it is not going to achieve its ultimate goal, which is to create better understanding between China and the United States. And I'm so happy to be joined by two of my old friends who have been demonstrating vividly every day what that cultural exchange is all about. Thank you so much, David Moser.
Thank you.
Teng Jimeng. Really appreciate it.
Thank
you for being with us. And you're watching World Insight with Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, I will speak to the governor of Missouri and his wife, the First Lady of Missouri, to find out how a state in the American heartland can cooperate with China. And by the way, they were students coming to China early in their days. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live Monday to Friday on CGTN. China-U.S. relations have progressed in recent days thanks to U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross' visit to China, which will follow by the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Rex Tillerson's upcoming visit. And states in the U.S. also have high expectations toward the bilateral relations, particularly later, the visit by U.S. President Trump to China. Missouri is well known for its abundant rice crop and cutting-edge agricultural technology, and Missouri boasts the second largest number of farms in the U.S. China is now the third largest trade partner and export market for Missouri. Last year, Missouri exported $1.8 billion worth of goods to China, a whopping 70% increase from 10 years ago. And I'm honored to be joined in the Beijing studio by the governor of the state of Missouri, Eric Greitens.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir, to our program.
It's great to be on with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to Beijing.
Thank you.
And the same welcome to the First Lady of the state of Missouri, Dr. Sheena Greitens. She's been doing China study research for a long time. Finally, you're here.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Great to have both of you here.
Great to be here.
Mr. Governor, I want to start with you.
Yes.
As a Navy SEAL,
yes.
of course, you've traveled around the world, but this is, once again, your visit to China. It's like an old, beautiful story renewed.
It really is. You know, the very first country that I ever traveled to was China. I came here in 1993.
First foreign country
It was my
ever.
first foreign country I ever traveled to was China. First foreign city I ever set foot in was Beijing. And it's amazing to see the transformation that's taken place here over the course of the last 24 years.
1993 as an exchange student, and now very different as a governor from the state of Missouri. I know you're here to do some real serious business.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about that.
So this is actually our very first trade mission is also to China. And it's in part because of the importance that we're placing on the relationship between Missouri and China. We already have some really extensive trade relationships, including over $1 billion in trade between Missouri and China. And our objective here is to increase those trade relationships, also create opportunities for investment. for Missouri companies to invest in Chinese companies, for Chinese companies to invest in Missouri, and then finally to really build on the kind of cultural and educational exchanges which we already have. There's already a very strong foundation of Chinese students studying in Missouri. We have Missouri students who are coming abroad to study here in China, and we believe that those person-to-person relations are incredibly important.
Both of you understand that really well.
Yes.
I guess Sheena was also, as a student coming to China 2008, that was the time when Beijing was hosting the Olympic Games. They say dramatic change happened since that day in China. Sheena.
对，我2008年
Oh my God, you're speaking Chinese to me right now. Very fluent.
在北京语言大学留学，
欢迎欢迎。
北京人、中国人都很欢迎我， 非
So
常
can we
感
speak
谢。
English now for our audience?
Yes, now we'll
Yeah.
speak English.
2008, you were here as a student.
I was, and that was a summer of tremendous excitement in Beijing, and a great time to be a student here because you really got to see the transformation in China and the sort of, internationalization in some ways of Beijing as a city that hosted the Olympics. And it was a tremendously exciting time to be a student and a very welcoming experience for me. So it's really, a pleasure to be back here.
Just look at the way Mr. Governor is looking at you just now when you were speaking Chinese. He is absolutely proud of the First Lady.
I am so proud of Sheena for so many reasons. But she has, on this trip, it's been wonderful to have her here with me because she has so many old friends in China. Who she's had the opportunity to connect with, to talk with, because she speaks Mandarin. It's really helped us to facilitate a lot of wonderful meetings.
I would assume other governors of the United States are very jealous about this reality right now. Having said that, though, you're coming here as a governor. We see different layers of China-U.S. relationship going on. At the central government level, we heard about President Trump likely to visit China later this year in November. And of course, there have been a lot of state relationship with China as well. So how much do you think your layer of relationship matter in the overall map? Is it going to be the stabilizing factor or actually the uncertain factor?
I actually think that the subnational relationships are incredibly important. The relationships between the state of Missouri and our sister province is Hebei, actually, and we actually just met with some folks from Hebei. I think those kinds of relationships are extraordinarily important. We've had the opportunity to meet with a number of senior government officials to share with them what's happening in Missouri. I'll give you one concrete example.
Sure.
Missouri is now the world leader in agricultural technology. So we have more plant scientists in the state of Missouri than any other place in the world. There's a lot of research that's being done in animal science, and given that work, recognizing the tremendous agricultural transformation that's also happening in China, we think there are wonderful opportunities to build mutually beneficial, win-win, prosperous relationships for both
But you're
countries.
going to have a lot of competitions, both from other states in the United States. They're also very active here, from the European countries as well. Some of the Asian countries are also very active here. So how are you going to bring out your competitive edge?
Well, I think there are a number of things that really distinguish Missouri. First of all, it's an incredibly stable financial environment. So for over 50 years, Missouri's had a AAA credit rating. We also want to let people know about what my administration is bringing. I recently was elected governor, and as governor, we pursued thank you very much. We pursued a number of reforms: labor reform, legal reform, regulatory reform, tax reform, to create a pro-growth, pro-jobs business environment in Missouri. As we want, our colleagues and potential private companies who we might work with in China to know that Missouri has a very welcoming business environment, and we look forward to increasing trade opportunities between the two countries.
But Mr. Governor, if I can, earlier there was some situations of riots and chaos in your state. Of course, you were very firm in exercising the necessary measures in your state, but people are still asking, is this environment stable for foreign investment, for example?
Yes, Missouri has a very stable environment for foreign investment. It's a very stable fiscal environment, and it's also, as you mentioned, it's a very stable social environment. We were very clear as governor that everyone in the United States, everyone has the Constitution guarantees them rights to free speech, it guarantees them rights to assembly, and we're happy to anyone who's peacefully protesting. We will protect people who are peacefully protesting, but we have no tolerance for violence or for vandalism. vandalism. Anyone who decided that they were going to break a window or assault a law enforcement officer, they were arrested and taken to jail.
You were saying in your Facebook page about your decision to put out this violence and riot then, you said the previous administration might allow them to happen, but it is not on your clock.
That's right, not on our watch.
But that's going to be very controversial, I guess, from certain perspective.
Well, I have to tell you, it's been so much support from people in Missouri and from the business community, because what they'd seen in the past was that we did have leaders who would often allow people what they called a safe space to loot or to burn. And we were very clear that there will be no looting, that there would be no burning, that we were not going to tolerate any kind of violence or vandalism, and that immediately we were going to step in and arrest people who engaged in that behavior. Because, you know, everyone in Missouri, we all have an interest in peace.
The other thing, of course, China has been accusing the United States recently of exercising protectionism actions about not letting a Chinese company to acquire a chip maker in the United States. Of course, these kind of cases coming up and down from time to time, but the question is whether we are having real fair environment for foreign investment, for example, from China.
Sure, you know, I think that it's really important to facilitate you know, trade and investment relationships between the United States and China. That's always been a very, very strong part of the U.S. China relationship, going all the way back to the founding of the United States in the 1770s. That commercial and economic relationship was really important. Yes, and so you know, I think that the states also play a really important role. Now, every country has certain exceptions that they might make to trade relationships for national defense. Every country is entitled to do that, but I think that, you know, especially at the state level, it's really important to focus on areas where there's a lot of room for collaboration, and that, you know, is why we're particularly excited in Missouri about agricultural technology, biotech, and life sciences. And personally, as a faculty member at the university, at one of our universities, the University of Missouri, you know, which also has very strong agricultural programs, I'm delighted to look at and try to think about what kinds of educational and cultural partnerships we can have, because, you know, we believe that the foundation of the U.S. China relationship is really in the people-to-people relationship, and that is the foundation of the sort of the higher level relationships. And we've seen that even with, you know, President Xi Jinping's relationship with the American Midwest and Iowa started as a people-to-people exchange relationship, and so that we really prioritize
that. Has been proved many, many times as a people-to-people relationship, the real fabric over there.
And I'd say in addition to that, you know, when you consider that the United States and China are the two largest economies in the world, and I have to say, you know, I had a lot of experience before I became governor working in developing countries around the world. And so I've worked in dozens of developing countries.
Afghanistan, Iraq, and even Southeast Asian countries, Africa as well.
Yeah, and did that work as a Navy SEAL. I also did a lot of international humanitarian work. I've worked in Bosnia, Rwanda, Albania, Bolivia, worked in India. And one of the things that you recognize in the developing world is how important economic growth is, how important that kind of prosperity is, especially in developing countries. And I think that when you consider that you add the United States GDP and China's GDP, you're talking about 40%, over 40% of the GDP in the world, you recognize how important it is for our two countries to work together and create an even more prosperous relationship.
It's a beautiful explanation, but Mr. Governor, you know, things happen, and therefore China investment in the United States has a lot of problems earlier with CFIUS, for example. That is, the organizations has usually talking about certain technologies are dual use. They could be civil use. It could also be military use, including probably life science, agricultural science as well, that you are very proud of. So in that case, how is the governor, let's just say, from the state of Missouri, going to help your business and going to promote this kind of business no matter what?
Well, I think, for example, in agriculture, it's a wonderful area to explore. One of the things that we recognize, both in the United States and China, is that over the course of the next generation, we're going to have to double world food production. And there's a lot of challenges and opportunities that are facing agriculture in China, lots of challenges and opportunities that are facing agriculture in the United States. And when we can can jointly develop and invest in these kinds of agricultural technologies that are going to help us to feed the world, I think that we're meeting a critical need for people for a safe quality food source, and it also can be a very prosperous relationship. We've had a lot of, agriculture is still our #1 industry in the state of Missouri. But over 250,000 people employed in agriculture, 108,000 family farms, major companies, major universities, and research institutes, all devoted to this. And I think that that's just one example of where working together, we can find ways to solve problems together and also create a very prosperous relationship.
Very interesting. I think the rest of the world is watching the United States. That is, people see unpredictability from time to time. So, as a governor and as the first lady of an important state, how are you going to make sure that your work is free from unpredictability? So, our mission is very clear, and that's more jobs and higher pay for the people of Missouri. And in order for us to build that kind of thriving and prosperous economy in Missouri, we recognize that trade relationships around the world, including with China, one of our most important trading partners, are important to enhance. And in order to enhance those relationships, I mean, you really put your finger on it, that kind of predictability is very important. And that's one of the reasons why I think people so appreciate the opportunity to invest in and buy from and work with Missouri, because it is such a predictable environment. Okay, are you going to, are you going to, at times pick up a phone or write a letter to the president, to the Commerce Secretary, and say, we want stable relationship with China because we are having this wonderful conversation with China during my trip there, and our people want to have ties with them. We're always going to advocate for the interests of the people of Missouri. So, for example, Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture, he made wonderful beef trade relationship with China, which Ambassador Branstad helped to facilitate. That was obviously in the interest of farmers and ranchers throughout the United States, but that was a place where it was very important for Missouri as well. We're always advocates to the federal government about what's in the best interests of Missouri, especially when it comes to creating a thriving and prosperous economy. But it has to be mutually beneficial too. Yes. Yeah, and I will also say that as part of that predictability, that's part of why we were really excited to come to China and to come to Asia as our first trade mission, and we've tried to emphasize throughout the trip that this is the first trip, but that we both plan to be back here regularly, that we plan to be here on a regular basis, building those ties in a very consistent and predictable way that will benefit, the people of Missouri, jobs in Missouri, and also be beneficial to the people that we're interacting with and our counterparts in China. And the great advantage we have, I'll just say, is that because of Sheena's experience in China, not only will I be coming back as governor, but the first lady is also going to be coming back, because we know that those kinds of regular interactions help to enhance that level of predictability and understanding. Yeah, we didn't have much time, but I'm willing to discuss all the modern China history and Qing Dynasty history with you, Sheena, next time you're here in our studio. But having said that, we're running out of time for now. This is how time flies when friends are talking to one another. We hope to have your state coming here frequently, and certainly the people-to-people exchanges you're talking about. Thank you so much. Absolutely crucial. Thank you so much, Governor Eric Greitens. Thank you. And First Lady Dr. Sheena Greitens. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.